Hi there, welcome to The Real Agenda with me, Tom Burgess. It's good to be back for the first episode in Series 4 of The Real Agenda. Thanks indeed for joining us. Now, this show was recorded in January 2023, so Happy New Year. Yes, indeed, let's hope so. But as Britain struggles with the cost of living crisis, Brexit fallout and multiple strikes, we wonder, what is the future for Britain? Is history just repeating itself? Have we made no progress since the 70s? And why are millions still struggling to make ends meet?
I'm Gavin Essler, and I want to see in Britain a more compassionate and just society. And that's one of the reasons I listen to The Real Agenda.
Now here at Real Agenda Radio, rather than just talking about society's problems, we want to see answers and hear about those answers and how we can make change happen. So back in June last year, 2022, there was a conference in London entitled The Future of Britain. Now this was billed as an ideas conference, not about a new party, but about a new policy agenda and the new politics that the implementation of such an agenda will require. So I thought, well, I need to be part of this, and indeed the event was very interesting and some very inspiring speakers. It brought together a few hundred people ready to see change and share a vision. The presentation was slick, with TV journalists Emily Maitlis and John Sopel hosting the show, with a welcome from Tony Blair, live appearances from Marty Money-Saving Lewis and Paul Johnson of the Institute of Fiscal Studies, Snapchat CEO Evan Spiegel, and video input from Larry Summers, former US Treasury Secretary, and indeed many more. But what has happened since? Have we moved forward? Where is the new policy agenda? Is there or will there be a new political grouping? Will we see ideas that are strong and radical and end the boom-bust cycle, reduce poverty significantly and the unnecessary hardship faced by millions every day? Will we move away from the tribal groups towards a common vision where the wealth we all help to create is shared more equitably? So to find out more about what's happened since this conference and what could be a bright, more equitable future for Britain, I called a friend of The Real Agenda. By that I mean someone who's been on the podcast before. And that was Wain, who's the Executive Director, Politics at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, who was one of the organisers of the event. And Ryan's mission at the Institute is, and I quote, to revive progressive politics. His team's work includes establishing a new progressive agenda with technology at its heart, while navigating today's political challenges. So I started by asking Ryan, why the conference?
Well, Tom, there are a few things that the country is seemingly united on at the moment. But one thing that people certainly are on the same page about is the future of our country, and it not being a very positive one. And so we did some polling a while back, speaking to a broad cohort of the great British public. And there's a real, genuine sense that the country is in decline and that its best years are behind it. But I and my colleagues at the Tony Blair Institute, we are eternal optimists. The world is changing in a significant way, but that doesn't mean that Britain's role had to diminish in it. But if we do want to seize the opportunities and take on the challenges of tomorrow, then we need to prepare ourselves for it. And that's where the conference was for. The Future of Britain conference last year was about posing some of the big challenges and asking some of the big questions of our time, but also really trying to understand how the world is changing and really to set ourselves up for what Britain needs to do in order to respond to those changes so that we can create a more prosperous, fairer, better, positive future. So that's where we get to the Future of Britain 2023 conference. So I can confirm that we will be holding it this year again. And it's about moving from posing the big questions, looking at how the world is changing, to start to put some answers on the table. And there's very moments in time at the Tony Blair Institute working inside the building, but also working with some great external thinkers in order to put together those answers now. So 2023 is about solutions to some of the big challenges coming our way.
So what do you think was achieved by the conference?
I think it was a forum where conversations that aren't being had elsewhere were had. So it's very rare to get politicians in the room alongside futurists, alongside super forecasters, alongside economists, looking at the long-term trends. I think so much of our politics is about the here and now, about short-term crises and how we respond to them. We often respond to them with more politics. I think this conference, the 2022 Future Britain Conference, was successful because the conversations were a lot different, even in the room itself. And I'm obviously biased, but we've had a lot of feedback from people who attended there who belong to different political traditions or belong to none. There was a real positive energy and a can-do energy. When progressive politics is at its best, it's looking to the future, it's feeling optimistic about what we can do in order to navigate it. And that was certainly felt at Future of Britain 2022.
So indeed, it was a very impressive event and well organised, and you said with great speakers and presenters and so on. But so what has been going on since that event?
Well, it's a great question because we have always been keen to stress that the Future of Britain programme, and indeed, let's think big here, the future of our country is not going to be solved in a one-day conference in central London. But don't let that diminish the importance of getting like-minded people into the same space to have a conversation. But we know that the hardware started the day after the conference, and that's where the colleagues at the Institute, some of our leading policy experts, they've convened working groups looking at a range of different issues, if you like, issues that combined present the outline of a manifesto or a plan for the country, working across things like net zero, education, healthcare, and really starting to pose big questions but come up with answers. So what is the long-term answer to healthcare provision in the country, recognising that health is absorbing huge amounts of day-to-day spending, and we've got a population that's only getting older. When it comes to education, we've got a working group looking at the big trends coming down the line, the jobs of tomorrow, but also seeing an education system in this country that probably isn't fit for purpose. It's a test of memory. It means a third of kids fail on an annual basis. How do we change and challenge assessment in order to equip the next generation of our workforce? And so these are the pieces of work that are being done inside the Institute. These are the policy questions being asked and hopefully answered. But we're also really aware that this can't be solved by one organisation, and it certainly can't be solved by a collection of individuals. So each policy question has a working group attached to it, and those working groups have been charged with bringing in external thinking and expertise, as well as looking internationally. There is so much that we can learn from countries around the world, countries in Africa, countries in the Middle East, of course, countries in Europe, the US and elsewhere too. And the idea is that we want to really supercharge our thinking by bringing in analysis and insight from elsewhere. But ultimately, each of these working groups, these policy areas, has the responsibility to come up with a set of solutions, of policy that is radical where it needs to be, but also practical, that a government can press go on in order to ready Britain for what is coming down the line.
So how many working groups are there?
We've got 8 working groups at the moment, but that we may need to add others as we start to learn more about the future and some of the areas that we need to look up. I can quickly run through those 8 working groups. Yeah, so we're looking at the future of the state. We get caught in a political debate between public ownership and nationalisation and big state, and then make the state as small as possible, privatisation. When actually there's this huge gulf in the middle, the enabling state, the strategic state, a state that embraces technology and has it running through its heart, and it plays a coordinating role with the public and private sector. So that working group is looking at that big exam question: what should the future of the state be in the 2020s and beyond? Then we've got net zero. Again, we're often caught in a short-term political debate between we need to revolutionise the country and transition to green as quickly as possible. And the ambition of that is noble, but often the means prescribed would change our way of living in a way that would be regressive. And then on the other side, we've got people, you've seen this from Nigel Farage, who are pointing at climate change and saying it's not our fault, it's not the fault of ordinary working people, it's China, it's India, it's big corporations, we shouldn't be doing anything about it. There's a space in the middle of that. So our net zero working group is looking at how we can achieve our net zero ambition as quickly as possible, but in a way that creates opportunities, that embraces technology. And then we've got infrastructure. You only have to take a train in this country or get on a bus and realise how bad it is. But what is the digital infrastructure? What's the transport infrastructure that we need for the 21st century? We've got an industrial strategy working group, which is looking at where the future growth opportunities are going to come from for Britain and how we use the state as an enabler to ready ourselves to seize those opportunities. And also that bleeds into things like skills policy. How do we make sure that we are readying our workforce, our next generation workforce for the jobs of tomorrow, and hopefully the sectors that Britain is going to excel in? Home affairs, again, we've got very stale debates here and very stale policy prescriptions when it comes to things like crime and immigration, when we need to look at novel solutions or solutions that have been employed elsewhere in the world and are working really effectively. An example of that could be digital ID. And what does that mean in tackling illegal immigration, exercising control over our immigration system? The future of policing needs to embrace technology. There's a lot of political debate around that, or will instigate political debate. What is that technology and how do we properly employ that? I've mentioned education. I've mentioned health. The final piece is Britain's place in the world. We set out the conference last year trying to understand the world that we're living in. And that's really important if we want to establish Britain's place in it. But what does Britain's relationship look like with its closest trading partners post-Brexit? Where are the new trading opportunities? What does technology, the internet mean for future global relationships? And of course, as we've seen last year, what are the big geopolitical trends that are going to be shaping Britain, and how do we play an outsized role in informing them and making sure that we are not on the receiving end of the negative fallout from them, but are able to better shape how the world is operating. And there are some big questions infused in all of that as well. We talked about the role of the state. We talked about digital ID, something that could run across everything. But I also think this conference and this piece of work is about democracy and the future of democracy, and the fact that I think we are in the fight of our lives. Anyone who believes in liberal democracy, I genuinely do believe it's under threat, and we've got to show a new model, new way of working, that actually gets things done, but also brings with it the brilliance of what it is to live in a liberal democracy, not least the fact that we have freedom and creativity and innovation. All those things should be assets instead of things that currently seem to pull us apart and divide us.
So the idea then is to put together a manifesto, a plan for Britain, separate from what the political parties or other political groups might be putting forward.
Exactly. The conference is about creating a political space that recognises that political parties exist, but doesn't try and attach itself to one of them, because otherwise you are, by default, then pulled into the day-to-day politics. But we tried to create a political space that sits above party politics, and I was really enthused to see at last year's conference the likes of Peter Kyle, Ruth Davidson, Rory Stewart, all in the same room, having a conversation, sharing ideas, and that is where the magic happens. So it's still a political space, but it sits above party politics. And indeed, the whole reason for being for this conference and this stream of work at TBI is that we're able to maybe look a little bit further ahead and bring in some different thinking and use our convening power to look at lessons from around the world in order to come up with ideas and plans for the country. Can't happen or be aired in existing political parties. So
do you think that the current political tribes are out of date and unrepresentative of the way people think these days in the UK?
I think they can be, but I've met enough people in different political tribes to know that there's a real willingness and desire to have this space and contribute to this space where we do think longer term about the future of Britain, and we try and carve out ideas. And I came from an interesting conversation just yesterday with a prominent Conservative talking about healthcare, who was massively aligned with Labour's Shadow Health Secretary on some of the reforms that need to take place. So I can start to see bits of consensus from across the big traditional political tribes on a desire to transform and change Britain and get it ready for the future and be even across some of those solutions. But, we are in politics, so I'm also very aware that we may disagree. But I actually think disagreement's absolutely fine. In fact, it's a welcome thing, and maybe we've shied away from that or run away from that too readily in recent years. But we want to also create a marketplace of ideas. I think we'll find common consensus on the challenges, on the opportunities across different political tribes. But maybe there'll be some tension in what the solution should be. And we'll create a space where we'll come up with the best ones.
Key to it really is getting cooperation and consensus. So therefore, is the idea, or is one route forward to create a new political grouping that sort of matches the agenda that the Future Britain team will put together?
Absolutely not. I think that would be, at this moment in time, a waste of political energy and time. We've seen new political parties rise and fall very quickly in the UK, and I genuinely don't think there is space for them. But I would reiterate that I've met enough serving politicians and actually future politicians, so candidates from the different political parties who are ready to engage in this policy agenda that we're developing and ready to contribute to it as well. Of course, British politics is in a bit of a dire place. That's an understatement. We will need to look at how we change, I think, how we do politics. But again, I think that will come from within the existing political traditions who recognise that the sort of Punch and Judy, short-term, day-to-day politics isn't serving anyone, including themselves. I do get the sense that changes are put on that. But you can't just simply wish away politics and change politics. I think what you need is a set of ideas that can galvanise and unite people. And so we're very consciously focusing on the policy and the ideas with the Future Britain work. And that's hopefully where we'll start to see people organise themselves.
And I'm sure the agenda will be very practical and a great opportunity. But how do we get change to happen? Because there's been pioneering politicians wanting to bring change, and it just doesn't seem to be significant, or they're not bold enough to put forward strong policy proposals. And as a result, we've recent terms been used sticking plaster policies that really don't go anywhere or don't solve the fundamental problems. And there's some fundamental problems that need solving. I
agree, and I think there's a recognition of that. And you mentioned sticking plaster policies, and that was a term that Keir Starmer used. So, mainstream politicians, including the leader of the Labour Party, are starting to talk about the need for us to introduce long-term. But you're absolutely right. Again, you can't just talk this into existence. You've got to build a political and policy consensus around it. And we are not a lone actor in this. We can't be. It won't work if it's just TBI and friends putting together a conference and developing a policy agenda, as important a part of that will be. We also need, as well as policy and ideas, we need forums to build that political consensus and that policy consensus. I look, for example, at the Times Education Commission, Times Health Commission, as two examples of an organisation that is political but sits outside of mainstream political parties, creating a space where they can have those conversations and start to draw together consensus. And I think it's no coincidence that the Times Education Commission recommended a British baccalaureate as an example, and both the Conservatives and the Labour Party have put some weight behind that. But again, it can't just be TBI and our friends and then the Times. We also need, as well as the spaces and the policy ideas, we do also need a cadre of talent wanting to go into politics and being able to go into politics. And I think this is a big failing of the political parties over recent years. I don't think they've done enough to really bring in that talent, and that often they reward the wrong behaviours when it comes to who stands as a candidate and who becomes an MP. I think that's changing. Having seen some of the people going for elected office and going for selection across different political parties, there is definitely very, very smart people going into politics, but I think we could always do more to make sure that we're bringing in the brightest and best. And that That'll be about making processes to get involved and stand in politics a lot easier. But it also means tackling some of those big challenges, some of those things that put people off going into politics, not least actually the safety and security of our MPs, and also some of the hounding and abuse that is held at them on a daily basis. We've got to change that, but that will change when it's linked to a conversation about the future of the country that's grounded in a set of radical, credible ideas, which is what I hope we can bring to the table.
Great. Let's look ahead a year or so, and after the next conference that you plan, here is the plan, here is the agenda. So this is the new agenda. What happens then?
Two things. One, it's not a static process in the sense that we don't then go through this, produce a document, put it on the table of political leaders and those in and around politics and say, here's all the answers, there you go, job done. It's an iterative, ongoing process. So after the conference, we will have set out a plan for the country that will have been contributed to by people outside of the Tony Blair Institute, that will have drawn on perspectives of different political leaders and different political parties, different political traditions, experts, folk around the world. It's entering a marketplace of ideas, and I can't stress the importance of this enough. We are at our best when we're putting ideas out there for them to be criticised and built upon, torn down, new ones put into the fray, and that is the space that we want to create. So hopefully, after the next conference, we've got that plan, but it's been talked about, it's been scrutinised, it's being improved because it's entering that marketplace of ideas. And then, we would be a terrible commercial organisation. It's a good job that the Tony Blair Institute is a non-profit because we want people to steal our work as well. If we put out this plan for Britain with its credible, but where we need to have them radical ideas, then they are there for the taking. And given the expertise that's gone into this, but also that on the ground research, it doesn't take much to realise the political opportunity for any political party really to base this into their manifesto, if indeed we are facing down the potential of an election towards the end of next year. Or it may even be that an election is taking place and there's a new government looking for ideas to some of the problems that they'll inherit, but also recognising that for them to be there for the long term, they need to have answers to the future. And they can steal away. They can take these ideas, again, build upon them, but hopefully put them into practice. I should also say as well, Tom, that this is, whilst it's a Future of Britain project, we are also in the market for renewing progressive politics around the world. And I've learned so much from conversations with different political parties in different countries and different progressive organisations. But there's something we can do with the Future of Britain work where we extrapolate it up into broad principles. Obviously, the context of different countries is going to be different, and allow counterparts in different bits of the world to interact with it. Again, tear it apart, build upon it, and create their own future of plans for their respective countries. And that puts us in a very, very exciting space there.
We can learn a lot from other countries, and I think that's very important. But how do you actually describe progressive? What does it mean to you?
Yeah. It's a problematic term as well, because I think it means very different things in the US compared to the UK, as an example. But for me, progressive is actually very simple. It's recognising that the future is as is and not trying to change it or alter it, that we have to lean into change and the transformations that are taking place around them and bend them towards the good of society, towards societal progress. We exist as progressives to make people's lives better across the board, to constantly improve government, and then by virtue of that, improve our countries that we govern. So progressive for me, it's future-facing, it's taking the world as it is, not as we wish it was. So there's a realism there, and it's coming up with solutions that aren't drawn from an ideological textbook, but are actually take account of how the world is changing and what we need to do in order to flourish and succeed in it, and have that spread across the board, across society.
It's good that you're getting these agenda together. But as we've seen in recent years, and the frustration felt by so many, is that simple things. So the government says we have no money to increase the wages of public sector workers, for an example. And yet organisations like Tax Justice UK puts forward how 47 billion could be raised, and also with the organisation, the Patriotic Millionaires, who are saying, tax wealth, the money is there. And the Tax Justice UK saying, we could do these very simple taxes, like aligning capital gains tax with income tax and so on. Some very simple things which would cause no hardship, would increase the amount of money available and things like that. Fundamental, really, but simple to do. And yet they're not done. And how are we going to overcome this? These vested interests that just don't want to do anything.
I think what you're talking about as well is a regressive, inwards-focused politics. And that is the thing that we are trying to challenge. Your specific example of the tax proposals, we are looking at those as part of the Future of Britain, where I think one of the key things is that they are baked into a broader plan that takes an holistic view of government, takes an holistic view of the state, and shows how some of the tax changes, for example, might lead to transformations in public services, rather than just entering a debate at this moment in time on industrial action, which is being responded to in a way that politics has done for the last few years, which is with more politics. I mean, the reason why your sensible proposals aren't getting a fair hearing is because you are up against a politics that is inward-looking and is just trying to navigate day to day. And what you're putting on the table, it's the right answer in some ways to solve problems, but politics has shied away from delivering and taking bold, big decisions. We want to try and bring some of that back by building political consensus around some of those big decisions that need to be taken and to be part of that broader plan. But like I said before, and you're seeing this now with your tax justice work, we are just one bit of the puzzle. Now, I think we can do more to get our bit right and develop those ideas and really put them out into the ether, so that be open about it, allow people to respond to them, to constantly build them, be patient in that way. But we also do need to see people in politics taking more of a bolder stance and being prepared to run with some of these things rather than just trying to get through to the next day. At the end of the day, why go into politics if you're not wanting to make the country better, if you're not wanting to prepare it for a future that's ahead of us, and you're not wanting to make positive change? And I mean, that's a really important message that can come from different organisations in the space, yours, mine, and also from the Future of Britain programme that we're embarking on with our different partners.
Well, you've certainly got a challenge there, Ryan.
Indeed.
I hope it goes.
What we want.
I hope it goes really well, because I think this is what's needed is an overall plan that takes us away from the party tribalism where you disagree, where it's about the party winning rather than what the policy is right for people.
This is about Britain winning, exactly.
Yeah. It's about, bringing more compassion as also into politics, so we actually do things that make people's lives better and actually, build for the future. So it's certainly a task ahead. It's important to obviously get more partners involved so there isn't really just one organisation.
Absolutely. And I should say on that, it's great work with you guys. We've worked with My Life, My Say, other organisations. So it's definitely not a TBI only thing. And in fact, if anyone's listening to this, feels that they can play a role in the Future of Britain, then Tom, share my details. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, that's what I was going to finish with. What can we all do to make change happen? And also you did mention, if anyone is listening to this, well, there'll be thousands, Ryan. So you're not the only listener.
I'm just thinking that my inbox is going to be inundated now. So absolutely.
And a final note: what can we all do to make positive, progressive change happen?
I think we've got to align on what the problem is that we're up against, and very quickly move on from aligning on problems to aligning on solutions. And I don't think we do enough. I certainly didn't do enough over the last few years to work out exactly what I stood for. I knew what I stood against, but I didn't really know what I stood for. But I think with something like the Future of Britain and, rich insight that's coming from different thinkers and different organisations. We've got to really lean into that, embrace it, take time out to understand some of the things, to understand some of the solutions, and start sharing them. And we've got to move on from building our consensus and coming together around a shared analysis of the problem to now coming together with a shared solution. And that is how you build political consensus. That's how you build political energy around something that is positive, something like a plan for the country. One clear, immediate way to get involved in that is to make sure that you're signed up for the Future of Britain Alerts, which will also include an invite to the conference itself. So come along to that, be part of that, but also recognise that it will only be a success if we take the conversation outside of the room, take it across the country, keep having it, and are open and willing and generous when it comes to sharing ideas and thoughts and perspectives.
Okay, Ryan, thank you very much. That's very interesting to get your views on these things, and I certainly hope we're going to see some major steps forward following from the work that you and others associated with the group are doing. So I wish you all the best.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate it. Really do.
Now, if you'd like to find out more about the Future of Britain project and indeed get involved, you can look it up at institute.global.com or email Ryan Wain direct on r.wain, that's WAIN, at institute.global. So what do you think? Do contact us at info@realagendaradio.org or Twitter at realagendanet or via our website realagendaradio.org. We'd love to hear your views. If you'd like a copy of my book, From Here to Prosperity, a new political agenda for a sustainable economy and greater social justice, go to fromheretoprosperity.org or indeed any good booksellers. You can also follow me, Tom Burgess, on Instagram, TomBurgess2709, where I post information related to Real Agenda Radio and the campaigning work I am involved with. Been a bit slack of late, actually, putting information out there. Been very busy, but not actually shared all that, but I will do soon. Anyway, for more information, go to realagendaradio.org. You can listen and subscribe to Real Agenda Radio on Amazon, Apple Podcasts, Google and Spotify, and more, where you'll find a range of podcasts for positive change. Now, we know we can achieve change if we work together, so that's what we're doing at Real Agenda Radio. The campaign groups and think tanks whose podcasts we distribute have a collective online following of nearly 1 million. Our challenge is to make sure they all listen to Real Agenda Radio. Our recent shows have included Network News, our regular update on campaigns that seek to bring greater economic and social justice, Taxcast from the Tax Justice Network, It's Bloody Complicated from Compass, podcasts from Shepard Walwyn, the publisher of the Ethical Economic series of books, and Across the Benches from Compassion in Politics. A special thanks to our sponsors, Switch, the workstation for your browser. Do you find yourself with too many tabs open and losing your place? Try switchextension.com. Free to download, save yourself time. I do, and it's great. One thing is certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as more courageous politicians prepared to do the right thing for people over party. But it's not happening. But it can. It's urgent, and it's up to us to make it happen. Now that's the Real Agenda. I'm Tom Burgess. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.